Erin Gee is a Canadian artist whose work primarily explores digital culture through the metaphors of human voices in electronic bodies. Sit with that for a while, it's a lot, right? Working in video, performance, robotics, and audio art, Erin has exhibited most recently and spectacularly, I saw this piece, at the University of Toronto Art Centre, Trinity Square Video Toronto, Musée d'Art Contemporain, Cirque du Soleil International Headquarters in Montreal. How was that?
That was really fun.
And Nuit Blanche in Calgary. For her work in multi-channel electroacoustic music composition, Erin was shortlisted in the Bourges International Electroacoustic Competition in 2009. In 2011, she was invited by new media artist Stellar to participate in a residency at Marx Institute, University of Western Sydney, to create and perform her opera for mobile robotics, Orpheus Larynx.
Yes.
Her excellent work combining robotics and human emotion has been reviewed in publications from Scientific American to Oyster Magazine, National Post, La Presse, and her own published work has appeared in Leonardo Music, as well as eContact, Journal of Canadian Electroacoustic Community. Erin is the creator of Future Femmes, an online blog archived by Cornell University featuring interviews, showcased work, and links to relevant articles on the topic of women working in technological culture. Originally from Regina, Erin is currently teaching here at Concordia in the Communications Department on the topics of sound, gender, and technology. Welcome, Erin. Join me in welcoming her.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Tamara. I'm very honored to have been invited to speak here as part of the Conversation and Contemporary Art series. It's really quite wonderful to see you all here tonight. So the video that with the bump and house music that you walked into when you first came in tonight, that is kind of, it's not really an artwork, but it's something I wanted to show you nonetheless. It's actually kind of a part of a performance that I did last year at the Musée d'Art Contemporain called Gig Vocaloid. Those that maybe saw the beginning of the video may have caught the announcement text flashing across the screen, along with various other messages from a fantastic future where pop music reigns supreme and the human voice is lost. X+1 was a really fun evening where me and Tristan Stevens, Sabrina Rate, and Benoit Palop, we curated over 40 internet-inspired artists onto screens in the Rotunda, and I've never seen so much stuff happening at the same time in that space. I created this performance for the evening to activate the space. The videos that you were seeing, there's 5 of them, and so you can see that I have 5 dancers here. And basically, Gig Vocaloid is the pop group. Here they are. But because the human voice is lost and only image matters, because this is where pop music is going, in this future, you don't hear the voice of the pop singers, but you can see it. What you were looking at is the larynx. The larynx is a kind of recurring theme in a lot of my work. I think it's absolutely beautiful. The large flap that kind of moved almost in this doomsday fashion over the opening, that's the glottis. And it's the muscle when you swallow and go, whoop. So that's the flap that actually folds over your throat. And that hole actually is the trachea, your windpipe. I love the physical mechanism of, I guess, how communication occurs. And so I'm interested in the larynx as this secret, forgotten, fleshy inside in all of us. And it's through this very simple vibration of folds moving together that I'm able to speak to you right now by pushing air through these two flaps. The sound is captured by this microphone, which amplifies the excited air and meets all of your eardrums. So in addition to the larynxes, there's also these cheeky messages like human voice is lost. In the heat of this night, our values happen to match. I wanted it to be kind of like maybe a dystopia for some, but actually maybe a utopia for others. I'm very interested in these synthetic futures that kind of betray or let down current romances about what music is and what the human body is, because I think that I'm ready for trying to pave some kind of aesthetics for the impossible, because the current human body and current physical circumstances have given rise to many kind of injustices and maybe hierarchies that don't sit very well with me. And so I'm interested in creating this vocabulary of the future that forsakes a lot of what we currently think of as humanity. I also love making music, probably because my earliest training was actually as an opera singer. I'm a pretty bad opera singer, that's why I'm here today. And I like that as my legacy. It's like Erin Gee, failed opera singer. I'm gonna fail at all kinds of historical things because actually that's what I do best, is kind of maybe purposely failing as best I can to represent musical heritage and musical excellence. Because in these ancient narratives that we still listen to today, and of course, my God, the work of past composers is gorgeous. I'm not going to take anything away from them, but I'm interested in the tragedy of personal hierarchies that almost play formulaically in opera. And how these, this style of music, very rigid rules for how it's set up, very rigid rules for how people interact, how men and women act, how they dress. I understand that this is a closer reflection of current reality than maybe my gig Vocaloiders, but I don't care. I'm inspired very much by I'm going to show you some earlier artists that really inspire me. Maria Komori was a huge influence on me. When I first saw her work in my undergrad, I was like, wow, she does all of this cool techno stuff I like, but she's a girl. And I was so excited about it. She made these photographs of kind of cybernetic women that were in these very subservient, strange positions, and they were almost ignored by all of the passerby that walked by her. And in an interview once, it's really hard for me to locate interviews, but in this one interview, the interviewer says to her, well, in all of your works, your women are smiling, and despite, the strange circumstances they're in. And she says, well, they're smiling because they're not real women. And I was like, oh, sign me up. I want to be an unreal woman. So some of my earliest work is kind of trying to marry these, I was trained as an opera singer. Of course, I love this stuff. I also have this relationship as trying as best I can to be a medium for another composer's ideas. When you're a singer, your job is to become this perfect channel for the past. And, almost there is like an element of like mechanics and technique to this that people work very hard at. And this contradiction between, of course you have to be yourself as a performer, but you also have to set that aside and just become a channel. This curious space between being a subject and also making oneself object, I think, plays very well with the figure of the cyborg, or the unreal. And So here I have one of my first works from 2008, Lucide. It's an interactive sculpture with two female characters. I asked my singing teacher right here to sing songs from her repertoire of women that she considered to be bad women. And another one of her students that I really admired, I asked her to sing songs that were good women. And I didn't want to really understand what that meant. It was just something I set up in this, this situation. I still to this day, I recognize some of the songs that they've chosen. There's no lyrics to what they sing. They just sing the melody. But anyways, I put both of their voices in these characters that are very static. And they are kind of replaying these fragments, these little pieces of past operatic and folk songs. And the way that you play them is you brush their hair. So you can imagine them just sitting there in a gallery, just waiting for their moment. Touch me. Make me come alive. And it's very rigid, right? Yes, there's this sound bank that can be chosen from with very clear musical fragments from the past, and there's this literal dichotomy set up, and so it's not super nuanced, but it was something I kind of wanted to bake my interests in, my romantic attachment to the repertoire of the past that I had been slaving to perfectly represent, with some imagined future of how these sounds could be heard. I really liked the idea of creating a sculpture almost like an alternative musical score in this way, because just like a musical score, it's very rigid. There's this paper, there's these lines that need to be moved through from start to from the start to the finish. This is just a different form of physicality. You just have to engage it with it a different way, but it's still a score. You move through the sounds as they have been set out by. I'm not a composer. I guess I'm an arranger. I created some other works where I was kind of trying to just create these alternative choirs where the audience needed to touch something that was very intimate. Also kind of mixing up the body, playing with this idea of a cyborg, or I don't know if it's cyborg. It was more just that I wanted people to touch things in the galleries to activate music. What is this? I'm not. Oh, here we go. Sorry, I need to click. I guess that's this reconfiguring of the human body, this reconfiguring of the musical score. I'm interested in doing this because I feel like the destiny of a song is written in a performer's understanding of its score, or in the audience's interpretation of how the score unfolds. But I do think that there is something kind of of destiny in the physicality of the score itself. In the same way, I'm not really full-on biodeterminist, because that's crazy, but I am interested in these new feminist materialist concerns with maybe we need to understand our physical reality in a total other way in order to unlock different forms of being. So the destiny of humanity could be written, at least partially, in our understanding of our own bodies, or even how we interact with our world. I write songs of an imagined post-human body, one that takes current assumptions about possibilities for musical structure, performativity, subjectivity, and objectivity for granted. My voice, as I understand it, despite the fact that I tortured myself with this attempt at becoming perfect in my early adulthood, my voice at this point is a site of deep play pessimism and joy, perhaps joy in pessimism. And I compliment what many people refer to as the narcissism of new media. I'm not sure, but there's this very famous Rosalind Krauss article about how all new media is inherently narcissistic. I want to compliment new media narcissism with the perverse pleasure of the digital echo, and I call this echoism. So, I mean, well, what do you mean, Erin? That doesn't make any sense to me. Well, Rosalind Krauss saying that she feels that all new media is narcissistic, it's that we see ourselves reflected in all of our media, from our smartphones to our computers to whatever, and there's this idea that we see ourselves reflected even in the recordings. It's what allows us to maybe identify with people in movies and stuff like that, is that the body is suspended between these machines that send and receive, and we just kind of ignore those things. Much like Narcissus ignores the pond that he's seeing himself reflected in. But if Narcissus was truly just self-obsessed, he would actually be really interested in this tragic character that almost no one knows about named Echo. Echo is the lady in the corner, and she was cursed to repeat everything she heard. She was in love with Narcissus, so she repeated everything Narcissus said, but I guess Narcissus just kind of told her to buzz off repeatedly. And I found this really sad, but also it's strange, because what do you mean? He's so obsessed with his visual reflection, yet has but can't deal with his oral reflection. It's just too much or something. And so it's this state of too much that I'm really interested in turning up. So you can see a lot of my work at a certain point is engaged with my face, but it's not necessarily because I'm into my face. It's because I'm trying to interrogate these strange shades of reflexivity. This work is called Voice of Echo. When I was just starting to think about this, of how can I find the voice of Echo, the mythological creature that was cursed to just repeat after Narcissus? What is her voice? She doesn't have a voice. Her voice is in the repetition itself, but it isn't actually what's repeated. So this video you're seeing right now, I mean, you see Echo, and Echo is pulling mirrors out of her mouth and putting the mirrors on her face in this kind of cheeky, I don't know, maybe flirtation with the video camera. But this isn't Echo. This couldn't possibly be Echo. So from this performance for video, I took images from the video itself, and kind of took these images and I converted them into the raw data, what they were actually made of on the inside. And then I imported this image, because this is a silent video, into an audio software called Audacity. This is called data bending. When you use files in the wrong way, you're bending the data to force them to kind of be in this other mode that sometimes works. So in bouncing the just image content of Echo into this audio file, and then exporting it again back into the image of Photoshop, and basically bouncing between programs multiple times, I was able to create this noise album called Voice of Echo. And I think that it's in the act of bouncing back and forth, it's only then that you can really hear what Echo is. So I'll have this glitch music for you. see, these are just some of the images that I was able to get out of when you bend things back and forth. You can still see these traces of echoes, like, you know, her face, but distorted in a lot of different imaginative ways through layers and copying and pasting and stuff like that. What I found fascinating is that this wasn't a one-to-one process. It's not like I just threw it into Audacity, this file data, and it's not like you could press a button and there's like, oh no, that's what the picture sounds like, because that's not what data bending's like at all. There's like actually like 8 different ways that this data can be interpreted, and then you need to throw it into this other, like, I mean, all in all, I think it could be interpreted probably over hundreds of ways. And so there was this art to kind of bouncing and finding and getting to understand the materiality of the code in this completely different way. And I just kind of put my favorite data bent moments into the Voice of Echo album that I made. It's at this point that I'm going to talk, shortly after I made this work, another artist that's been really influential on my practice, and probably who, when I saw Stellark's work, also as an undergrad, I was really into painting and representing things, probably part of my romantic opera singing past. And I saw Stellark walking around in a hexapod saying that we are all zombie cyborgs and consciousness might be all an illusion. I was like, oh my god, how can I do this? I have to. And of course I don't know how to, like, you know, I've never even taken apart a clock before, but I was on a mission from that point on. I just had to figure out how to turn myself into Stellark, basically. Which is really strange because Stellark came in 2010 to Montreal to speak. And some people in this room were probably at that talk. And after that talk, I just kind of came up to him like this silly fangirl, and I didn't know what I was going to say. I just kind of said, like, hey, Stellark, and we talked about Second Life a little bit, and that was kind of it. And he gave me his email address and said we should hang out on Second Life sometime. And on this weird lark, I just kind of messaged him because I was given this opportunity to study abroad, and I thought, well, maybe Stellark knows of this cool place I should go. So just weirdly, I emailed Stellark and said, where do you think I should go? I can study abroad for a semester. And he said, oh, come to Australia, you should work with me. Yes. So what happened was he was working on this project here, and I'll just let the...
The Prosthetic Head is a project that also deals with prosthetic augmentation of the body. In addition to mechanical attachments or extensions or biological growing of the extra ear, here we have a virtual entity, a prosthetic head that has a database on a server in Philadelphia. It has real-time lip syncing and speech synthesis. So the head is a kind of embodied conversational agent. The head speaks to the person who interrogates.
Who interrogates it. So he was working with this notion of, like, you know, creating this prosthetic performer himself. And he just kind of said, okay, come to Australia. You're going to have some robots at your disposal. Can you put on a show with my prosthetic head? And I thought, this is so awesome. I am going to be Stellark's Echo. So I set right to work and created for myself Orpheus Larynx, this piece where Stellark's head, I just kind of wanted as many of Stellark's heads and my heads floating around as possible. There wasn't that much possibility. We only had so many TVs. But, and I made this kind of 20-minute long opera song. I'll click on this so that you can see what was going on. This is all the Prosthetic Head's voice.
It was this hope of yours that kept me following. hallucination, listening in plural, and you were singing me.
My voice.
Already new skin was forming on me. Within the luminous misty shroud of my other body, already there was dirt on my hands. And I was thirsty. Dirt on my hand, there was dirt on my hand, and I was thirsty, and I was thirsty. I could see only the eye, I could see only the shoulders of your head against the cave mouth, against the cave mouth. Could not see your face at all, not see your face at all.
A lot. I think it was funny. Tamer was mentioning. He said, "I'm not sure if your work is supposed to be beautiful or chilling," and I think most of all, I just want to have fun with the future. The future for me. I mean, the present is a messed up place. The present makes me angry a lot. The future is wide open. And I want to be the one who creates the mythologies and the imagery about the future to keep it positive and weird and full of potential. I don't want the people at Google to do that for me. So after working with Larynx Head, it opened up this whole new world of possibility for me in Sydney. At the Powerhouse show, a scientist named Von Macefield saw the show, and he just kind of strangely said to me, I'm a scientist, and he has these very particular aspects of his study that we'll get back to later. But he says to me, I've always wanted to work with an artist. And it seemed really weird that he would say that, because I said, well, what are you doing next summer? Let's just work together, come on. And so I came back to Sydney again the following year to work with him, but also to collaborate with Oliver Bone, who also was at that show. We, together with Ollie, we were talking about just making this AI choir. Animos, basically, it's something that mostly Ollie was working on, but I was interested because I created this choral piece or this song a little bit kind of in this free spirit where I was cutting and pasting up feminist text of Elizabeth Gross, talking about architecture from the inside and the outside. So literally when you're seeing this work, the architecture of my face changes with the architecture of the song, and everything's fluid. So the dream is alive. there's a bunch of different like modes. There's like a kind of more quiet, meditative mode for the artificial choir to be in as well. The work just kind of ran on autoplay at the Tin Sheds Gallery for a month. We found as many as old and at the time not working computers as possible, and somehow they were brought back from the dead to sing once more. And all the sound came literally out of these old computers. So each one of them really was like a little choir member. More recently, you see this incredible collection of larynxes that I had at the beginning of the evening. I've always been interested in the larynx, and I kind of popped the larynx into this kind of image-making program, and discovered this kind of way of representing the larynx that I just found visually attractive, and completely by accident discovered what looked like music at the borders. I don't know if you can see. Just down here might be it's hard for me to do this with my mouse, but I discovered that just down here, like completely by accident, there was, you can see the staves, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these little kind of marks in there for what music was. And this greatly overjoyed me because it was finally at a point where the computers were talking to me, and I could use this as raw material for just making their dreams come true. So in this case, the electronic voices were put into the human bodies, and I debuted these songs from the silent image of the human throat just this last summer. So the work that I made in allusion to with that scientist is what gave birth to Swarming Emotional Pianos, which I think is the image on the poster for this event. It's a fleet of robotic chimes that creates music driven by emotion. The scientist that I talked to, von Masefield, he's a neurophysiologist that studies basically what are the physical responses to emotion. Like how do these subtle changes in breathing, blood pressure, sweat release, how many beats per minute your heart is beating, how all these things put together actually kind of paint a portrait of how an emotion feels to someone, because how I feel anger might not be how someone in the audience feels anger, like actually experiences anger in their body. And so these strange patterns, there are some universal kinds of ways that our bodies respond to emotion, but in fact, as it turns out, science still hasn't cracked the exact math behind what happens to our bodies when we become emotional. But I've been working with these biosensors just to work with the raw data and see if music can come out of this. And I'm interested in this because much like with the voice of echo work that I showed you earlier with the materiality of the glitch and the data that gets driven back and forth, I can see how this is very much so like the data that lives inside our human bodies, and how even what we assume to be an object, like in just our bodies ourselves, actually is a part of our experience. And I'm interested in bringing this alien quality of our own bodies to the fore. Something that's really interesting that I've been able to work with, because I've been working with Vaughn, is something called skin sympathetic nerve activity, which is derived by actually inserting a sensor through a needle into a nerve that is connected to, that's been proven to correlate with emotional output. So tungsten microelectrode is inserted into the nerve of an awake subject in order to gain access to the electrical activities of a single neuron. So anyways, you can kind of see neurons, they exist in the brain, but actually these nerves travel and send signals all throughout the body, so you don't need to put a needle into the human brain. You can stick it actually just below the knee, and that'll work. Thank goodness. In the 30s, they were doing these experiments on cats, and they were much less fortunate. So you can see inside a nerve, you don't just poke it into the nerve, but actually you need to hit an axon in a nerve. So this is very, very delicate needle that gets worked with. It's actually 5 times thinner than a human hair. And you need to poke into the right axon to get the right signal. But actually tapping into this, the the electronic frequencies in our bodies, Vaughn's research has kind of proven it's not as though the activities in this nerve are, it's not like this nerve activity or these pulses can actually tell you what emotion is being felt. But what's interesting is that it's likened a little bit to an emotional volume knob. So you can see how in combination with the sweat release, the activity of the heart, and the respiration changes, that this neural data can be very interesting. So didn't want to subject other people to this before I tried it, and this is the video of me bravely getting this needle inserted into me. And he later told me I was his second worst subject. Oh wait.
So estrogen is just flooding out this side. This is going to go into your skin, so we're just going to be sitting in the
Should I be inhaling or exhaling?
Going in on 3. Inhaling is probably better. On 3. 1, 2, 3.
I didn't feel it at all.
Exactly. And once again, on 3.
So the first one was just the reference electrode, so that can just get poked in anywhere. This one, they have to move it around a lot.
Okay.
Do not feel anything down the leg
It's-
or the foot yet, but we just need to know when you feel that, because that indicates that we're close to the mouth.
I see. Yeah, it feels tingly in the leg.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. Actually,
They're actually
I
running
feel
electricity
twitch.
into
I
my
just
leg
don't
right
feel
now.
0.5?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Can you just come up slightly?
So,
Stop there.
Erin,
What do you
you
want?
hear the clicks.
Yeah.
0.5.
So it's a single pulse coming
finger on
once a
one
second.
click if you like.
Yeah.
So any sensation
You
should
really
be
have to be ready for my call if anything you feel
It is.
pain, then
Okay.
take it straight off. Okay.
And where do you feel that, Erin?
I'm feeling it mostly locally.
Okay.
It does seem to have a little bit of a shooting sensation, but doesn't go very far.
Okay.
Really rapid response.
Yeah, I just felt like I had a shock through my
That's alright.
Okay.
my leg, and it went into my foot.
Okay, that's a good sign.
But what we're going to try and do is to get those twitches happening and then sort of work our way down. And then if we get really, really close to the body, then there is a possibility that you can feel that strong sensation again. But now we're going to try to prevent it as best we can.
Got it. Something strange. Yeah, that one ran. I'm starting to doubt my feelings now.
So, was there a twitch?
No.
We're very close. Azridin may well be in, or just on the outside of a fat scroll going to the skin.
Okay.
And we'll listen to that, and we'll listen to your anxiety-related activity.
So it's at this point when they start dragging out the expensive biosensors. Which I later completely rip off and make my DIY versions.
Roll up nicely. Yes, pain. Needles.
In your foot?
No. Yes. I felt a thing go down it went all the way down. Like a little pulse.
But no longer.
No. Yes. Yeah, I'm definitely feeling it. Yeah, I can feel pain in my leg now. You ready? Yes. There.
Is that current?
134.
104. Or where are we going on listening? Okay. Because that's obviously very close.
that white noise. Yeah, you can actually hear the electrical activity. So they're literally poking around inside my nerve. So it's not pleasant. What's really sad is that I guess that mostly it was my anxiety of feeling pain that really prevented them from just poking around. And it normally takes, it can take sometimes they luck out and they find it in the first 10 minutes, and sometimes it can take over an hour like it did with me. So I just wanted to show how it's not like you just poke the needle into somebody and it works. Sometimes it's a long process to actually get the needle in. Eventually I actually jumped and it was really weird. It actually knocked the needle into place. And he told me that would be the last time we would do it, so. But I think in coming years we'll see. So like I said, I was able to borrow all kinds of wonderful medical equipment from Thought Technologies and AD Instruments, but eventually I really found that I needed to make my own because it was very difficult to work with in Max MSP with their stuff, which was not intended for amateur musicians. So the next thing that I did was I made these tests that I video recorded with actors that I told to activate emotion. I was very interested in actors because I thought to myself, if I'm making musical instruments that are supposed to be controlled by emotion, then I'm building a cello. Who's going to play the cello? Well, people who are really good with emotions. So I hired, hired is a funny word. I'm working with some people here in Montreal who are very talented, and I did lots of kind of research myself, imitating a scientist, to gather signals off of lots of subjects and see who the best people for the job were. Eventually came up with a short list of 3 or 4. And the following are pictures of the 2 that were just absolutely phenomenal. They if I get them into a session and I say sadness, within 2 minutes they'll start crying. And it's not just that they're crying. And it's not just that when I then say happiness, they just wipe away their tears and start laughing like it never happened. It's that the biosensors react. That it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter if I'm convinced. What needs to happen is that my sensors need to be convinced that they're feeling an emotion. And so not only are they actually displaying an expert performance, but actually they're feeling it to such a degree that their body is reacting in ways that I can then kind of exploit to create music from. So here's some shots from these sessions. Participating in these sessions is a really, really intimate experience. It's quite powerful to how much empathy is aroused inside me when I'm looking at my computer. You can see I have this, this computer with graphs that are going by because the sensors are attached to him. To actually kind of sit there and think, oh my God, you're in the depths of despair, and I can see it. And you don't need to say anything. I see it. It's quite powerful. This is kind of what a typical emotional session looks like with these individuals. And so you can see I've divided the the kind of emotional zones into different color areas. I gather maybe about 7 different data points, I guess, or I'm not a scientist. I'm just learning, so I might not be using the right language. But I divide up you can see clear differences in all the data in all the sections. And it's important too to kind of note how it takes maybe a minute or so for people to get into the emotion they're feeling. So all this data, all these raw numbers, I then take these numbers from their body and it goes into a max patch where there's an algorithmic music generator. And so all these numbers kind of enter this probability machine where I just kind of use what I know about how music is supposed to be set up and let the numbers kind of build the music that it will. And after this music gets made, these get sent as MIDI signals to these handsome fellows, the Swarming Emotional Pianos. This is a video of, I believe, their debut last year. And I'm always working on this. It says, I think, when I first showed you this, introduced you to this work, there was this little thing that said 2012-forever, because I'm not really sure I'm ever going to be done. But I'm still tinkering around with how the music works. Yeah, static version. They're gonna move soon. Sorry, I know that word was a lie. It's not sadness he's doing right now, it's boredom. Some people, when I talk about this work, I think they actually envision, like, you know, if you're feeling happy, that, like, you know, really bitchin' guitar solo comes out of the robots or something. I'm quite interested in what the robots have to say, rather than my expectations of what emotion should sound like. I kind of think of it like a really like a kind of more, it's like a polygraph test, or like, you know, a lie detector test with like many more dimensions to it, because that's what music allows, is that there's these connections that can be made between past physical gestures, if we could call, you know, these fluctuating rhythms inside of us gestures. But of course I'm always working on new ways to crunch the numbers together. I'm also continually working on the robots themselves. I have this video from some movement tests that I did at Eastern Bloc a few years ago. My dream is that actually I can make the whole thing live and have the robots dancing around the person. So here's some videos of them actually, you know, doing more pre-recorded music rather than stuff. So I did take this picture. Like this is ideally how the whole work will play out in the future. Is much like my fantasy pop stars, where the human voice is lost. I'm interested in a future theater where maybe technology has driven humanity to a point where we find it very difficult to express ourselves in person because we're so used to text messaging and stuff like that. And so the mere act of going to the theater to watch someone feel becomes an epic spectacle. And just to verify that they're actually feeling, we have these robots that are going to amplify their emotions so that we can feel their body rhythms in our own bodies. I kind of put this funny list of hashtags up on the Facebook. I guess I kind of like working in hashtags and these things that I don't really know how explicit to make them, but this is kind of the stuff that I'm most interested in exploring and pushing in my work. Although a lot of my work kind of comes from a place of deep play and just trying to subvert expectations of what is a subjective body and what does a subjective body do. Before I let you go, I'm just going to show you some hot new unreleased stuff. Yeah, so this summer, oh my god, I've been given a children's choir. Oh yes. So this summer I'm going to be sicking my emotion technologies onto a choir, and it becomes this interesting question of like, well, how do you choreograph emotion among people? Sympathy is going to ruin it all or make it excellent, I'm not sure. So I'm going to be focusing on laughter and the contagiousness of laughter and seeing if they can mechanically turn their pleasure off or something to execute a work as a choir does, but all they're going to have to do is feel delighted to certain degrees. And we'll have to rehearse exactly getting these degrees of delightedness out of them and seeing if we can activate these memories in them to see if they can execute a score well. Also featuring excellent pianist Daniel Añez. I'm also working because I've had so many people come up to me and say, oh wow, I bet you I'd be an awesome person for controlling your emotional robots. And I think, you'd be surprised. Usually people aren't. You stick them on them and you say, okay, be scared. And they just kind of look at you nervously and all you get is mild anxiety. So I thought, why don't I make a video game? So people can really put their emotions to the test. Because then that way, if you're not actually capable of doing it, it's something you work on. People work on video games. So, why don't I, create these tools for us all to feel our emotions for pleasure and to reach a goal. So I will be, my dream is that I'm going to be modding a first-person shooter featuring virtual pop stars. And also I'm working on this like semi-top secret, it's not top secret, but I'm working on a website with Kai Cheng Tom. I have a real heart for survivors of sexual violence, and so we're going to be working with this interactive online platform for making new music with this group of people, which includes me, of course, and probably lots of people that are in this room. So survivormusic.net will emerge at some point, and if you feel inspired, you can come by and contribute your own survivor sounds. So finally, come visit my website. New one's coming soon, but in the meantime, you can visit. That's the end of my talk. You want to talk to me?
I'm wondering if you would say something about like the relationship between your work, the way you see the future, and utopia/dystopia, because I found it really interesting to hear you say that the future seems better than the potential for the future seems better than the current present.
Right.
But the idea of people not being able to access their own emotions. I mean, I know it's a framework, but it's also I feel like you would have something interesting to say about that. So.
Well, I think that there's this notion of the future that's popularly talked about right now. If you're on the radio, it's probably going to be some guy in Silicon Valley saying we got to innovate so we can get to the future. And it's really like the Italian futurists at the turn of the 20th century who are just kind of like, yeah, everything's going in a straight line, we just want it to go faster. And we all know that global warming's real and doom is real. So I'm not necessarily interested in the future like this place that I zoom off to. I kind of like the future like this weird dream where there's it's almost like I've skipped a beat or something. And I think that by creating your own kind of strange future, because I think that when a lot of people talk about the future, I mean, the people that want to talk about the future are just people that want to make as much money as possible. So they're going to sell something to you about the future, that it's going to be easy, that it's going to be encased in plexiglass, and that there's going to be an app for everything. And I like trying to build a future that might have echoes in the present that allow me to talk about things I want to talk about in the present, but actually seem impossible for me to address in the present. And so I guess I kind of feel like if I can control the future, maybe I can create reverberations in the present, or create this this future iconography or something like that. Like it is a utopic view in a way, but it's more out of this deep pessimism that I think that if we just keep on going in a straight line with what we have, that doom is coming. So I don't want to believe in the Silicon Valley version of the future.
Hi, my question is, what sound are you looking for? Because you said in the future you're going to be having a choir, and getting the feedback from the choir. My question is because you're going to have a feedback loop. If the choir hears the response of the machines, it should feedback into the system. And I wonder if you're looking for that, or you're looking for the machine sound, or what sound are you looking for? Because are you going to compensate for the feedback to the loop?
Well, I mean, that's something that I'm going to have to take into account, but it's as any composer will tell you, it's always an immense privilege to work with other performers, because, you know, to get 8 people in a room at the same time is kind of rare, that just want to sit down and execute the music that you want to try. And so it's going to have to be like deeply experimental. I'm probably going to be looking for, over the next couple of months, some non-professional choir members in Montreal to kind of run tests with, but it's a question of what's possible, because feedback loops are real, but I'm excited to work with those feedback loops because I've never really done it before, because working with the actors in the past, I was just really, the scientists I was working with told me that it'd be impossible to get people to activate their emotions, and turned out it was possible, and so now it's just time to jump over the next hurdle. And I don't know what's going to happen. But there'll be music.
I wonder if I could ask a question about collaboration. You take a directorial role with the people who are activating the machines or staging their emotions, but what about the scientists you're working with? How do you understand that collaboration? Do you take a directorial role, or?
I'm very directorial with the, it sounds so weird, but
Yeah.
I'm very directorial with the scientists because I'm working specifically with extremely cool scientists. The scientists kind of have said, this is a new opportunity for us in the long run. Like, I think Vaughn is interested in researching things with me that he isn't capable of researching. Because if you think about it, what I'm doing is kind of discovering a language of the body and how to sonify that language of the body. And you can't really write a paper about that because it's actually an art project. And so I think that Vaughn is just interested in giving me a microphone, And there isn't really actually a lot that Vaughn needs to do anymore, besides give me some general advice when we eventually do write a science paper together. But because I used to be using his equipment, but now since I'm making my own, I've on somebody that I can send an email to or call every once in a while at this point. Till the future when suddenly it's not the case anymore.
I just had a question. I can do that.
For
I think it's for the documentation. The machines want to hear you.
Understood. So my question is just related to like audiences, and with your work, it's obviously like very well thought out and beautiful, but I'm interested in your definition of music versus noise. Because obviously to someone who doesn't know kind of the idea behind the work, it might be construed as noise, so I'm interested in your, I guess, definition of that.
It's a very good question. I guess that I can't presume to know what an audience expects. I mean, there's a chance that some audience members will consider it noise and others won't. I try to aim as much as possible to represent the materiality of what I'm working with rather than imposing myself on it. That's why I'm very excited when I find sets of data that seem to exhibit patterns I can work with. And it's a tightrope act. I mean, I'm massaging the human data to create sounds, and of course, you know, I'm controlling the algorithms, but to me, being true to the idea is the most interesting aspect of the work. And there's a wide range of what's considered music in art galleries now, so I'm just gonna do what I do.
Oh, hi.
I don't know where you are. Oh, hey there.
Well, you just said that you're interested in sonifying body, right? And well, I could hear it from your work, and I find it really at the same time it got me thinking. Oh, sorry. Low battery. Okay. So, at the same time, I've seen that throughout your work there are at least 3 layers of mediation among body and the sound that's produced. You have the mediation of performance. You have the mediation of the setting, especially in the last one, because things are like produced in a laboratory, right, situation. And it has the mediation of instruments too. So my question is, what happens to the bodies?
Just in time.
Okay. So my question goes to what happens to the bodies and their effects after they go through all those mediations and all those transformations, and in relation to the same bodies and the same affects in everyday life.
That's a really good question. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if what you just, like, I mean, this is the glory of communication, is that here we are 2 bodies, and actually there's a communication problem, because I'm not sure exactly how to answer your question. Yet we're both here in the real and only mediated by these strange microphones. So, I mean, yes, there are mediations. I am interested in this paradox of having, you know, this real experience. I don't believe that a transparent emotional communication can occur. I think that really all I'm doing is I'm holding up a microphone to a different aspect, like the kind of unconscious physical aspects, but how we understand each other is only going to be as good as how we understand each other's mediations. And maybe this is the evolution of text messaging, where some people don't care that the text message is, you know, like 2 words or something like that. Another, you know, like I guess it's kind of a contemporary problem. I'm more interested in, like, is there an emotional response? And when Larynx cries through the recording, is the person in the art gallery moved? Despite the fact she's been mediated several times.
your hashtags here. I was really curious, what does new feminist materialism mean?
Oh, yeah. Elizabeth Gross, the woman who I took the Animos lyrics from, in 2007 she gave this talk, and I'm not sure if she invented it, but she's how I came across it, and this is when my friends first started talking about it, and my understanding of it, which may be an imperfect understanding, is that Elizabeth Gross said that feminist, like liberal feminism, kind of had this idea that if we just allowed women to have the same opportunities of men, that it would fix everything. And radical feminism said, no, we need to take women away and have women-only spaces and kind of question the institutions that are led by men in order to correct, injustices. And that didn't, the radical feminism, maybe the project is still ongoing. And so she kind of was speaking as this feminist who's been very dedicated to this struggle for a long time. And I guess that she said that maybe it was time to start questioning what we understood as material reality. And this is kind of echoed in science and technology studies. And so it is kind of almost an open question, I think, and I almost feel scared of meeting the eyes of people who are going to look at me and say, Erin, I don't know if you understand this completely well. But I have faith in what she said, is that, maybe it's possible that we misunderstand material aspects of life on Earth that could be helpful in the feminist project. And feminism not just as women vs men, but actually feminism as that which uplifts and aids with many oppressions, or even tries to piece apart oppression in general. There's a few people that are giving me a thumbs up, so I'm glad that question really scared me. Thank you.
I'm just going to continue the terror for you.
Bring the terror on.
Just further to that question.
Your microphone, I don't think is on.
And yet the light is on, so.
Okay.
Oh, wait. And now it says goodbye to me. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, you got it.
Turn it off and on again, basic actually, right? Okay, further to the question about new feminist materialism, is that something that has been inspired by or is speaking through speculative realism and object-oriented ontology sort of area of study? Is this, do you know?
I'm not, I haven't read a paper on speculative realism.
Okay. I'll stop there then. It sounds like it might be influenced by that, so I was going to ask if that was.
I'd say object-oriented ontology is influenced by new feminist realism.
Okay, that's something I think is worth.
Go Jake.
That's a long.
What else would you say?
I'm very happy to let Jake talk.
It's back to you.
Oh man. And I guess that's kind of there's many great. I guess I kind of look at it the same way, is that I think to myself that I definitely consider my work feminist, but one of my peers had said to me once, yeah, but I don't think if I looked at your work I would ever really see it. If I just walked into the gallery and I saw your work, I'd never see the feminism in your work. But that's kind of the part of maybe it's a cynicism in these other methods, and I'm trying something else, and it is an experiment, and it might not necessarily work, but it is the spirit that I have.
I don't know much about the object-oriented ontologists, etc. But the Krauss paper is familiar to me, and I wonder how you understand your response to her claim that work that features images of women is sort of prevented from being radical feminist work. from the outset because it plays into a trap of visibility. Do you respond to that?
Well,
like, have you considered just doing sound work to get around that problem, or?
Well, I guess it's sort of like why I'm interested in this figure of Echo, because narcissism and narcissists, I mean, it's almost in my sound class the other day, I thought it was funny because I've been talking around this idea of like narcissists, he also is the subject-object dichotomy. He also is site-based knowledge. And one of my students just kind of piped up and said, "Oh, this is just semantics." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I guess maybe." I mean, the fact that there is this word that refers to this one idea and that echo is something else. Echo is like the vibration that makes up meaning, and I think this is what makes her uncomfortable. And she's this figure that kind of disrupts the self and other dichotomy. And so I guess by literally, I mean, I don't want to work just with sound quite yet. I guess that's what Voice of Echo was, but it still came from sight. And I think that's because I think you have to have one and the other, like the hand of the oppressor and the hand of the oppressed go hand in hand kind of a thing. And I think there's a little bit of narcissist and a little bit of echo in everyone, and I kind of just wish that they could all be in love, you know? Narcissist is image and echo, just living together.
I'm just curious if your emotional performers, if they're pricked as well.
If they're what?
Pricked as well.
Oh, in the future, yeah, but I mean, the thing is that like getting I mean, Vaughn is busy with his own stuff, and I really think that me and my performers would need to go to Sydney to get to have the neuron needles go on. They're ready for it. I mean, I talked to them about it before, but it's just everything has to happen in its due course. And as it turns out, I have so much experimentation due just with the feedback aspect that was brought up earlier in the front that I want to really have things nailed down before I get into the nitty-gritty of the mind. Because if the system's too noisy, then why bother with all these like weird bells and whistles that I can't even use yet? So. But it is something I'm experimenting with and I'm working on, and yeah, the performers are it's going to happen with them too. We'll see what happens. I've done some tests in Sydney too with other non-professionals. It was difficult for me to get. I don't have the connections in Sydney as close as I do in Montreal. Like the performers just kind of seem to come out of the air in Montreal, whereas in Sydney I just kept on getting really weird subjects that weren't very good.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Erin.